he did. There is all sorts of evidence. God has left us plenty of evidence to demonstrate that he is God and has every right to claim authority in our lives. He not only said he was God, we've been studying those passages, but in a week we are going to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I don't know how much more he can do to prove who he is when he comes back from the dead. Now, if he is God, then the only reaction is what? To fall down at his feet. That's what Joshua read. And I think it's good for us to go back to that Philippians passage where the Apostle Paul says, therefore God exalted Jesus to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. Don't you think it's reasonable to say that if there is a God out there, and he is almighty, and he is personal, he gets involved in people's lives, and he is perfect, he's perfect in every way, don't you think it's reasonable to say that when that God reveals himself to human beings, everybody's just going to go boom, to their knees? Now the question is how are you going to fall to your knees? Are you going to fall in terror? Or are you going to fall in love? And that's the question of Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is his invitation to each one of us to receive him today, so that when he comes, the reaction will be yes, instead of oh, no. But what about the blessing? What about the benefits and the blessings of having Jesus Christ the King of our lives? Well, Palm Sunday, this account, it ends tragically. Jesus comes to this hill and he overlooks Jerusalem and he weeps. And then he describes something that is absolutely horrible. He describes what was going to happen in 40 years. That's what that whole description is about Jerusalem being dismantled piece by piece and people being dashed against the rocks. What Jesus foresaw were the Romans coming in 40 years later. You know how many Jews were killed in that campaign? 600,000. That's like killing half the population of Hawaii. 600,000 people. Now you ask yourself, was Jesus lashing out at the Jewish people because they didn't receive him? Were his feelings hurt? Was he mad? That doesn't fit with the context. What's he doing? He is weeping. He is saying this does not have to be. This is a waste. This doesn't have to happen. Now here's the point. If God is the source of everything that is good, and you remove yourself from God, what are the possibilities that you're going to have long-term good in your life? Not much, huh? Do you remember what the mob shouted when Pilate had Jesus before them? And Pilate said, "Here is your king, what shall I do to him?" And you remember what they said? "We have no king but Caesar." They separated themselves from God. They separated themselves from the source of everything that is good. And they gave themselves over to Caesar. Look at what Caesar did to them 40 years later. He decimated their country so that only 1,900 years later, the nation of Israel existed. The greatest blessing in the world is to let the Lord guide our lives. Because the eternal blessings translate into daily blessings. You know, so often, you know, it's such a great thing to see so many young people here. But one of the real great temptations of being young is that you think that all this eternal stuff is never going to reach you, that it doesn't have anything to do with you, and you think this is all irrelevant, and nothing could be further from the truth. The older people are smiling and thinking, they don't think they're going to get old! Oh, well, you will, but don't worry about that. matters right now. You can't make sense out of your life without the eternal principles that Jesus brings to us as our King. Because of that, we know who we are. We know what has gone wrong in our lives and what keeps going on that's wrong. We know what the solution is, and we know it's going to happen. It makes a whole lot of difference to know that you have been created by a personal God who's got a unique purpose for your life. It changes everything to understand the role of sin, how deeply sin and evil is in each one of us, and how it leads us to just absolutely mess up our lives on a regular basis. It's absolutely necessary to know that there's hope, that sin doesn't have to control us, that there is forgiveness for that sin in eternity, and there's forgiveness right now, and there is the opportunity to move ahead and overcome evil in our lives. And there is the blessing of knowing what's going to happen. That there's life after death, that there is an eternity with God. All of that translates into practical blessings in your daily life that go on and on and on and on. And let me just give you some right now. To the 10-year-old child, young person that goes to school, who understands, number one, the first part of the creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty. What does that mean? That means that God made me and all creatures. He gave me my body and soul, my mind, and all my abilities. Now, if I really believe that, if that 10-year-old really believes that, God made me, He gave me my mind, my ability, and so on, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to sit there in class and go, am I going to talk? Am I going to not pay attention? If that 10-year-old boy or girl really believes that the fourth commandment makes a difference in life, that you're to honor your father and mother and all the authorities that go with it, which include teachers, do you think he's going to do his homework? You think he's going to get there on time? You think he's going to make trouble? He's going to study. And what's going to happen? He's going to do that when he's 10, and 11, and 12, and 13, all the way through high school. And what's going to happen? He's going to graduate from high school, and he's going to be ready for work. He's going to be ready to produce. He's going to be ready to do something with his life. Would you say that's good? I say that's pretty good. Let's talk about the guy that goes to work, or the woman that goes to work, and reads Ephesians and takes it seriously, where Paul says, you know, don't work only when your boss is watching you, but work all the time. In fact, you work as though Jesus Christ is your boss and he's with you all the time. Now, how is that person who takes that principle serious, that spiritual principle seriously, how is that person going to work? They're going to be there on time? They're going to work all the time? Is their quality level going to be good? What's going to happen? Now, I'm sure somebody's had a bad experience with this. You know, you do the right thing, you get nailed anyhow. But by and large, what happens? We move ahead, right? A husband and a wife who take seriously Paul's words, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. What's going to happen in those marriages? Sure, there's going to be problems. There's going to be difficulties. But when two people are committed to each other, to love each other that way, what's going to happen? You're going to get it. I'm going to bring up one last example, and this is really important. It's a particular subject, but you know, it's in front of us all the time. And again, a lot of young folk. So we've got to talk about what is really, really hitting you. We've got to talk about sexuality and what is God's plan. There's no more practical area where God blesses us, but there's no area which we are so tempted today because of what is presented on TV. On TV, sexuality is presented as something without consequences, just like eating or drinking, satisfying your thirst, satisfying your hunger. There are no consequences. And when I talk to people